Name's David, and today I'm going to be giving you 5 reasons you should be buying the M4 iPad Pros, and 5 reasons why I think you shouldn't. And hopefully this video will help you guys out. I know personally I was looking at the M4 iPad Pros to replace my 2018 iPad Pro, so it's kind of a comparison for me as well. So let's get into the video. So I want to start it off with 5 reasons why I think the M4 iPad Pro is actually worth it. So the first point I want to bring up is that the new iPad Pros have the tandem OLED. Now, if you had the 11-inch model iPad Pros, you know that you've had the Liquid Retina LCD displays, and those didn't have like the mini LEDs that the bigger iPad Pros had, so you were missing out on a huge contrast ratio. And I think that that was like a really bad thing about the 11-inch iPad Pros. Even though they were more portable, you did sacrifice that screen quality. So now there is no sacrifice. The 11-inch and the 12.9-inch both have the tandem OLED displays, so that's pretty cool. Now, if you've seen the tandem OLED displays in person, you're gonna realize just how beautiful these displays actually are. So I was at Costco the other day and I just decided to take a look at the new iPad Pros because I haven't seen them in person. And I have to say that the tandem OLEDs that Apple's using on these displays are probably the best displays I've ever seen, like in my life. Like I've seen OLED TVs, I've seen, the mini LED iPad Pros, but this OLED that they're using, it's just amazing. Like I've never seen something so bright and so vivid and like just that inky blacks. Like I have an OLED on my iPhone and it's nowhere near the same quality in my opinion as the one that's in the iPad Pro. So that's just something to keep in mind. Like the iPad Pro has the best screen I've ever seen, like period. So it's kind of hard to beat that. It gives a justification to its price, but at the same time it doesn't. So you're not buying the iPad just for its screen. And I think that's where, like the big pitfall is, but just know that the iPad Pros right now have a phenomenal screen. And I don't think that you're going to find anyone who thinks that its screen is bad or like inferior in any way, just because, I mean, it's an OLED that's able to reach 1000 nits of sustained brightness. Like the mini LED iPad Pros on the regular standard definition or like just SDR content, it's only able to reach 600 nits. So 1000 nits of sustained brightness. And a lot of people are reporting that it doesn't even like throttle down the brightness in, bright sunlight. That's a really important thing to think about, because if you're outside using your iPad Pro, even if you have like reflections, you're still able to see the display just because it gets so bright. And of course you have that 1600 nits of peak brightness when you're watching HDR content. And I think that this is probably the best viewing experience, especially if you're like using it for watching movies or editing movies. I don't know, you might be doing that too. But anyway, like it just has such a beautiful display, and I think that's one of the biggest reasons why you should be looking at the M4 iPad Pros. Another reason to be considering the M4 iPad Pros is its chipset. Now, the M4 was introduced with the new generation iPad Pros. It's not on any Mac yet, so it kind of just makes that iPad Pro now the most superior chipset that they have. And I think that obviously that it's going to be trickling down to the MacBook Pros maybe later this year, or maybe even at WDC, we'll see. But as of right now, the M4 chipset is the fastest base M series chip that Apple has made. And I think that that really shows just how performance oriented this iPad is. However, obviously I'm going to be discussing some of the pitfalls of that later on, but as of right now, the M4 is a pretty serious processor. And I mean, you're getting the same performance as the M2 in a lot of your daily tasks. However, it's only using half the power. So in that way, it's also more power efficient. And that's how they're able to stretch the battery, even though the design is now thinner. And that brings me on to my third point, the thinness and lightness of the M4 iPad Pros. Now, the M4 iPad Pros is touted by Apple to be the thinnest Apple products ever made. They're 5.1 millimeters thick. I'm not going to say thin because that's all just marketing jargon. So 5.1 millimeters thick, and yeah, they're really, really thin. And the best part of that is that they're a lot lighter now. But the thing is, with that thinness also comes at a cost. And you know, again, I'm going to be talking about this later, but yeah, just as right now, if you're looking for a really portable package, I think the iPad Pro right now is a really, really tempting thing because it's just so thin and light. It's kind of unbelievable how thin and light it is. And you really have to experience it in person just to realize, like, they packed in such a beautiful, bright display in such a thin and light package while also delivering the same battery life as before, and also having just a really, really nice experience using it. So, you know, you have to give props to them for that, especially if you're daily carrying your iPad Pro. I think that having something thin and light is a really important thing to consider. So the fourth point to get you to buy the M4 iPad Pro is going to be the new accessories. Now, if you're starting fresh with your iPad and you don't have the previous generation iPad Pros and the accessories that they had, this is a really great time to be buying new accessories because the new Magic Keyboard is improved quite a bit, I would say, just from my experience in using it for a little bit. I felt like the new aluminum base plate on the bottom is definitely a lot more premium, and it feels way nicer than the kind of like rubber texture that the previous Magic Keyboard had. And of course, you do have the Apple Pencil Pro now, and you don't need the M4 iPad Pros to use that. You can also get the M2 iPad Airs, but the new Apple Pencil Pro is a really interesting device because it does basically carry the same design as the Apple Pencil 2. However, the internals are definitely way better in my opinion. You do have things like the Taptic Engine now for actual like haptic feedback with the pencil, and I think that makes a huge difference, as well as features like the barrel roll and the hover. And I mean, the hover was also with the Apple Pencil 2, but that's only on the iPad Pro with the M2 processors. And now you have it also with the Pencil Pro. And another feature of the new Apple Pencil is also the Find My capabilities. Now just keep in mind that the Find My capabilities aren't the same as like what you'd get with an AirTag. It's just like a rudimentary kind of version of Find My, but it's still nice to have that feature in my opinion. And of course, you also have the new squeeze function. And I think that's a really cool way of changing your tools, like what you're using. Because, you know, on Procreate, I use Procreate all the time, you can do the double tap gesture for switching between your like eraser and your pencil. But having the ability to switch my pens is something I really wish I had. Like, I don't know why Apple didn't think about that before. But now it's with the new Apple Pencil Pro. So combining the new portable and also more premium feeling Magic Keyboard with the new Apple Pencil Pro, it's definitely the best accessories that Apple has released for the iPad. However, they are pricey, so keep that in mind. The fifth reason, and this is kind of a stretch, that you should be looking at the new iPad Pros is the new camera system. And the reason why I say that is if you're using your iPad Pro a lot for the, you know, front-facing camera for video calls, it's now in the landscape orientation, which it should have been, especially during like the whole Zoom and the pandemic. But now it's in landscape, so that does make it seem a lot more natural in video calls. But the one thing that is kind of weird is the omission of the ultra-wide camera on the back. They did delete that, and instead now you do have a brighter and more advanced True Tone flash that's able to scan your documents at a better kind of contrast ratio and without the shadows. So, I mean, honestly, I think that's the best use case for the iPad Pro cameras, just like scanning documents. I don't think anyone's going to be filming a whole feature film using the iPad Pros. So having the better flash is kind of more useful than having the ultra-wide camera. It's just a weird omission to have, especially when you're paying so much for a device like this. But yeah, those are 5 reasons I think that you should be looking at the M4 iPad Pros. Now, I'm going to give you guys 5 reasons why I think you shouldn't be buying the M4 iPad Pros. And I think that this might sway you against it. So, the first reason why I think that you shouldn't be buying the M4 iPad Pro is the cost. And yes, these iPad Pros definitely come with quite a high cost. And that's one of the major things and reasons why I think that the new iPad Pros are kind of bad in a way. Just because it came with a $300 price increase. And I mean, yeah, I can see why. Obviously, with inflation and also having to manufacture those tandem OLED displays, it's going to cost more. But I think a $300 price increase was way more than we were expecting. So now the base 11-inch iPad Pro starts at $999. And if you remember, just like back in 2018, that was what the original 12.9-inch iPad Pro started for. So that's quite a huge increase for what you're getting. And the base models do come with 256 gigabytes of storage now, which is a good thing. I think that that's what it should have been from the beginning. However, with the $300 price increase, it's basically like you've been paying for that storage now. And yeah, I mean, it's just kind of crazy to think about, because once you consider like the price of the iPad, so like a 12.9-inch base model iPad Pro, $1,299, and then you add things like the Magic Keyboard for $350, and then you add the Apple Pencil Pro for $129, and then you add the Apple Care warranty because you want to protect your investment that's almost $2,000, then you have to add on your state tax. And at that point, it ends up being over $2,000. And it's kind of hard to justify $2,000 iPad, in my opinion, just because at that point you can be looking at getting quite a beefy MacBook Pro. And if you are using this iPad for work, I think that having a Mac is actually quite a bit more useful, depending on what kind of work you're doing. Obviously, if you're an artist or illustrator, the iPad Pro is an invaluable tool, and you'll be happy to pay, whatever price it costs. I mean, you might not be happy, but it's a lot better than buying something like a Wacom and a MacBook Pro. So I think the iPad Pro has a very interesting value proposition there. However, that doesn't mean that it's the best value, because the biggest competition for the M4 iPad Pros is the iPad Pro. Now, I have a 2018 iPad Pro here, and it also has a Magic Keyboard, and it also has an Apple Pencil that also magnetically attaches, and it also has a 12.9-inch screen. And I'm able to use things like Procreate and LumaFusion, Affinity Photo. So in a lot of ways, what does the new iPad do that this iPad can't? And I mean, obviously, this iPad's going to have a lot of different things that are like not great with it, because like I said in my review of this iPad, the 4 gigabytes of RAM is quite limiting. But if you just upgrade to the M1 iPad Pros, you're going to have 8 gigabytes anyway. So at that point, the RAM is not an issue anymore, because the 2024 iPad Pros also have 8 gigabytes to start with. So yeah, it just kind of blows my mind that the new iPad Pros cost so much, when really it was kind of just a spec bump with a better display. And the fact that you have to buy new accessories is really off-putting, because if you could just reuse your old accessories, I think that the new iPad Pro would have been quite a great upgrade for a lot of people, especially for me. Like, if I was able to reuse my accessories with my current iPad Pro, I would have just bought the M4 iPad Pro already. Because yeah, I mean, it's expensive. It's $1,300 basically, but I don't have to pay essentially $500 for new accessories. So it kind of made it worth it in that case, like just being able to reuse your old accessories. But since I'd have to buy new accessories, it makes it quite a bit more of an investment. And I think that's where the new iPad Pro falls short. The second thing that I want to bring up is the kind of minor improvements over the recent models. And I kind of touched base on that with my last point, but the M2 iPad Pro before it is basically the same as the M1. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. And the M1 iPad Pros were already fantastic. Now, the M4 iPad Pros, yes, you are going to see an increase in performance. However, I would argue that the apps that we have today are not going to be providing enough of an increase in performance for the new iPad Pros. So I'm sure that you guys have seen other reviews where they compare it using LumaFusion and Final Cut Pro, but the reality is that a lot of the people who are buying the iPad Pro aren't going to be editing feature films or editing tons of 4K, 8K video, multicam video. They're going to be artists. And I think that's what the iPad Pro is catering itself to. And a lot of people miss the point, because as a tech reviewer, you think of it as a piece of tech that you can replace your laptop with, but it's not technically trying to replace your laptop, even if Apple's marketing is trying to tell you that. And as an artist myself, I do find the iPad Pro an invaluable tool for me, because it's let me make things I wouldn't have been able to make using my MacBook. But that means also that these iPad Pros, the old ones, are just as useful as the new iPad Pros. So, if you're looking at the iPad Pro right now and you have a recent iPad Pro model, I don't really see a reason to upgrade, you know? So, like having an M1 or M2 iPad Pro, it's already a fantastic device, and I think it's going to continue to be a fantastic device. So, if you have those devices, it doesn't really make any sense to upgrade to an M4 unless you want the OLED display. And really, that's pretty much it. Obviously, you also have Apple Pencil Pro support, but the Apple Pencil 2 wasn't bad either. It's still a really great pencil. I mean, they still sell it today. So, yeah, I think that just comparing it with the previous generation iPad Pros, it really falls short in delivering something that is a substantial increase other than in price. So another issue I want to bring up is the actual displays on the new iPad Pros. And right now it's kind of a controversial topic because some people are experiencing the 11-inch iPad Pros having a warmer display than the 12.9-inch. And I think this really comes down to it being like a product that was just released recently and just kind of working out the quirks and kinks in the manufacturing process for the iPad Pros right now. So the 11-inch iPad Pros have displays that are manufactured by both Samsung and LG, while the 12.9-inch are manufactured by LG solely. And I think that's where there's like this variation in color temperature for the displays. So you may want to wait it out just a little bit before you buy an M4 iPad Pro, just to make sure any of the kind of quality issues get worked out. And, obviously you can look at buying something like Apple Care and getting it replaced later on, but it's just easier to buy it when you know that the quality issues have been fixed. And there's also complaints about the OLED displays having kind of a grainy texture. Honestly, in my experience, I didn't really notice it when I was in the store. It might be different for everyone else, but in my experience I didn't notice it. But it's just something to keep in mind. The fourth point I want to make in not buying the new iPad Pros is the port selection, actually. And it's been basically 6 years since this iPad Pro design came out with the 2018 iPad Pros, and yeah, they've added Thunderbolt 4 support with the USB-C connector. However, that's all you have, just one USB-C connector. And I think this is a really big missed opportunity from Apple to include more than one USB-C connector, or at least have more than one on the Magic Keyboard, just because people want to connect accessories to their iPad Pros. If you're going to market it as a super powerful computer replacement, you've got to have the ability to connect more than one thing at a time. And yeah, you can purchase a dock for it where it has like all the different, adapters and everything, but it's just another thing to carry around with you. Whereas if I have it like on my Mac, yeah, I have multiple USB-C connectors. Or if you have like a new MacBook Pro, you have your HDMI, you have a headphone jack, all of that. But with the iPad Pro, you gotta carry an adapter if you want to use any of that, unless you're using one accessory that uses USB-C. So I think just having such a limited port selection is a really big bummer, especially now, considering that this design has been out for such a long time. I mean, I think that they could have added at least another USB-C port, but thinness. Now, the final point I want to make for not buying the iPad Pro is what you're going to hear from every reviewer right now, and that is the software on the iPad Pros. And I mean, it extends to the entire iPad lineup, really. And basically, the software for the iPad Pro is not good enough for the hardware that it has. And, Apple markets the iPad Pro as a laptop replacement, a computer replacement. And for a lot of people, yeah, it can do that, but it doesn't fully replace a computer, in my opinion, just because you don't have the ability to use desktop apps on the iPad Pro. And you're going to hear a lot of people say, oh, why don't they just put Mac OS on the iPad Pro? And I think obviously Apple doesn't want to do this because it would cannibalize the sales of the MacBook Pro. So in that case, the iPad can never have the capabilities of the Mac. However, I would want to see something such as Samsung DeX, for instance, where if you dock your iPad, you get a kind of desktop experience and having the ability to download desktop apps. Now, I'm not asking for macOS to be put on the iPad. I'm asking for the ability to download apps that are desktop quality or desktop equivalent. Of course, now we have like things like Final Cut Pro and Logic Pro and DaVinci Resolve, but they're made for the iPad. I'm asking for the ability to run natively the desktop variations of those apps. And I mean, I don't care. It doesn't have to be necessarily on like portable mode as well. I think it would be great to have it on like a docked mode and have it where it's able to increase its performance or whatever just based on how much current is running through the charge and if you're connected to a display, and then you can run those desktop apps. It doesn't necessarily need to be portable mode only, because then you'd have a really interesting proposition for people who want something light and portable on the go. They have the iPad Pro, they have the ability to take it out of its case or its Magic Keyboard, use it as a canvas, use it as a tablet, but once you put it on the keyboard, you connect it to your display, you're able to run full desktop apps. I think that's a really fantastic value proposition, and I think for a lot of people that would sway them towards buying the iPad Pro, and consequently also buying them at higher storage tiers, so Apple still makes quite a bit of money because the storage upgrades are quite expensive. In that case, though, it basically makes the iPad Pro, and I think that that's what it really needs. You know, we've been saying for 6 years now, oh, the next software update, oh, the next WWDC. You know, it's going to be this year that the iPad finally becomes a Pro device, and each year we're disappointed. And I think that now the iPad lineup is more than powerful enough to handle stuff like this, so it's up to Apple now to release the software that is able to take advantage of the hardware. And yeah, those are 5 reasons why I think that you shouldn't be buying the new iPad Pros. So yeah, I hope this video helps you guys out, and if you have any reasons why you think you should or shouldn't that I didn't mention, I'd appreciate you leaving them down in the comments below. I want to see if people have a different way of thinking about the iPad Pro than me. And yeah, just kind of seeing, why did you buy a new iPad Pro, or why did you keep your old one? So just trying to see where people are on this topic and what they think about it. I think it's a really interesting topic right now, especially since WWDC is coming up next week as the time that I'm filming this video right now. So yeah, that's pretty much it. If you guys like the video, consider subscribing to see more content just like this. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.